Let's take a closer look at the presidential election and where it stands right now today. I want to bring in moderator of The Hill and chief Washington correspondent Blake Burman. Blake, good afternoon. We are now less than a week out before the second Republican primary debate. And just 6 candidates are expected to be on stage. Former President Trump, once again, opting out. What does this mean for us, Blake? What can we expect?
Well, you know, they raised the threshold as to who could make it on stage, and Donald Trump has said, or is expected, as Robert just pointed out, not to be there, to be in Michigan instead alongside the United Auto Workers, or at least trying to court their vote next week. Look, for the candidates who are up on stage, they just are trying to continue to move the ball forward, right? Continue to raise their numbers any way they can, especially those who are polling, call it give or take in the 3 to 5% range. For Donald Trump, clearly he has made the calculation that he didn't need the first debate because his numbers have held steady and, if anything else, have gone up since then. So he doesn't need this second debate. He's also not expected to be at the third debate. He has very much shifted into general election mode. We did see him, though, yesterday in Iowa. It's a little bit of a reminder, Nick, that, yes, he still has to run on the Republican primary, perform well in Iowa, New Hampshire, South Carolina, and on down the line. So Donald Trump keeping an eye on the primary, but also, I think you could say, putting much of his attention and focus on the general. And
even handing out pizza. Blake, also, and for these 6 candidates, what is key for them to stand out in a meaningful way?
Look, they're going to be speaking to Republican voters, right? And in many cases, in independents. Again, it's just, how do you move forward? How do you keep your campaign going? How can you stand out? You know, this has almost been talked about as a vice presidential audition, potentially. Some of these candidates, maybe if they're not elected, win the primary and become on to be the next president, maybe they want to be in the next Republican president's cabinet, if that's what it ends up getting to. It's just trying to move forward, Nick, for these candidates, because as we know, Donald Trump right now, when you look at the most recent polls, basically anywhere from like 57 to 62%. 50% is sort of that magic line. If you hit it, you are well in command, and Donald Trump is well above that at this point in time.
Blake, you know I've got less than a minute, but I have another question for you. A new poll says President Biden would lose 2024 in an election matchup against 3 Republican candidates, Mr. Trump, former Governor Nikki Haley, and Tim Scott, with Haley having the best chance of beating Mr. Biden. What are your thoughts on that? Because I know that you've been following this closely. And can Haley be the first woman president?
I think it's interesting, and Nikki Haley especially, because remember the first debate, the issue on abortion. Nikki Haley is the only woman who remains on the Republican side who is running for president. And when it came to the topic of abortion during that first debate, she gave a comprehensive, a vast policy proposal, or how she thinks Republicans can handle it. Remember, Nick, in 2024, what we saw. Abortion was the issue that essentially stopped this red wave that a lot of folks thought would happen. And now there's this narrow majority for Republicans in the House. So what does that number tell us about Nikki Haley? Is it about Nikki Haley per se? Or is it about that if Republicans can find candidates who can talk about abortion, then maybe those numbers start to pick up all across the board? And by the way, what have we seen Donald Trump do in the recent days? Move away from Ron DeSantis' position of a 6-week abortion ban and start keeping his attention on the idea of maybe broadening out his abortion position for the general election. He's catching some heat within the Republican Party for it, but I think those Nikki Haley numbers speak to just that, her stance on abortion. And when you put her head-to-head against Joe Biden, she does better than anyone else.
Blake, you know I can't let you out of here before you tell us what we can expect tonight on the Hill.
We will be talking about Vladimir Zelensky, at least to start the show. 5 o'clock, he is going to be here giving a major speech in Washington. But one of the key things to watch is you have this divide, Nick, now in Washington between the Senate and the House, and Republicans in the House and Republicans in the House on whether or not the U.S. should continue to fund Ukraine and the war there. We will keep an eye on what Vladimir Zelensky has to say. And by the way, we will speak to a couple members of Congress, Republicans from New York, as the governor in that state has said, if you Are a migrant coming to our state, think about going elsewhere. How things have changed in New York, Nick.
Oh, and of course, all this while we're trying to avoid a government shutdown. And of course, you can watch Blake tonight on the Hill, 4 p.m. Eastern, right here on News Nation. Blake Burman, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.